Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is from Chapter 301. Chapter 301. Petya, having left his people after their departure from Moscow, joined his regiment and was soon taken as orderly by a general commanding a large guerrilla detachment. From the time he received his commission, and especially since he had joined the active army and taken part in the Battle of Vyazma, Petya had been in a constant state of blissful excitement at being grown up and in a perpetual ecstatic hurry not to miss any chance to do something really heroic. He was highly delighted with what he saw and experienced in the army, but at the same time it always seemed to him that the really heroic exploits were being performed just where he did not happen to be, and he was always in a hurry to get where he was not. When, on the 21st of October, his general expressed a wish to send somebody to Denisov's detachment, Petya begged so piteously to be sent that the general could not refuse. But when dispatching him, he recalled Petya's mad action at the Battle of Vyazma, where instead of riding by the road to the place to which he had been sent, he had galloped to the advanced line under the fire of the French, and had there twice fired his pistol. So now the general explicitly forbade his taking part in any action whatsoever of Denisov's. That was why Petya had blushed and grown confused when Denisov asked him whether he could stay. Before they had ridden to the outskirts of the forest, Petya had considered he must carry out his instructions strictly and return at once. But when he saw the French and saw Tikhon and learned that there would certainly be an attack that night, he decided, with the rapidity with which young people change their views, that the general, whom he had greatly respected till then, was a rubbishy German, that Denisov was a hero, the Esau a hero, and Tikhon a hero too, and that it would be shameful for him to leave at that moment of difficulty. It was already growing dusk when Denisov, Petya, and the Esau rode up to the watch-house. And the twilight saddled horses could be seen, and Cossacks and Hussars, who had rigged up rough shelters in the glade and were kindling glowing fires in a hollow of the forest where the French could not see the smoke. In the passage of the small watch-house, a Cossack with sleeves rolled up was chopping some mutton. In the room, 3 officers of Denisov's band were converting a door into a tabletop. Petya took off his wet clothes, gave them to be dried, and at once began helping the officers to fix up the dinner table. In 10 minutes, the table was ready, and a napkin spread on it. On the table were vodka, a flask of rum, white bread, roast mutton, and salt. Sitting at a table with the officers and tearing the fat, savory mutton with his hands, down which the grease trickled, Petya was in an ecstatic childish state of love for all men, and consequently of confidence that others loved him in the same way. "So what do you think, Vasily Dmitrievich?" said he to Denisov. "It's all right my staying a day with you?" And, not waiting for a reply, he answered his own question. "You see, I was told to find out, well, I am finding out. Only do let me into the chief. I don't want a reward, but I want." Petya clenched his teeth and looked around, throwing back his head and flourishing his arms. "Into the very chief," Denisov repeated with a smile. "Only please, let me command something, so that I may really command," Petya went on. "What would it be to you? Oh, you want a knife?" he said, turning to an officer who wished to cut himself a piece of mutton. And he handed him his clasp knife. The officer admired it. "Please keep it. I have several like it," said Petya, blushing. "Heavens, I was quite forgetting," he suddenly cried. "I have some raisins, fine ones, seedless ones. We have a new sutler, and he has such capital things. I bought 10 pounds. I'm used to something sweet. Would you like some? And Petya ran out into the passage to his Cossack and brought back some bags which contained about 5 pounds of raisins. Have some, gentlemen, have some. You want a coffee pot, don't you? He asked the Esau. I brought a capital one from our sutler. He has splendid things, and he's very honest. That's the chief thing. I'll be sure to send it to you. Or perhaps your flints, they're giving out, or worn out. That happens sometimes, you know. I have brought some with me. Here they are. And he showed a bag. 100 flints. I brought them very cheap. Please, take as many as you want, or all if you like. Then suddenly, dismayed lest he had said too much, Petya stopped and blushed. He tried to remember whether he had done anything else that was foolish, and running over the events of the day, he remembered the French drummer boy. It's capital for us here, but what of him? Where have they put him? Have they fed him? Haven't they hurt his feelings? He thought. But having caught himself saying too much about the flints, he was now afraid to speak out. I might ask, he thought, but they'll say he's a boy himself, and so he pities the boy. I'll show them tomorrow whether I'm a boy. Will it seem odd if I ask? Petya thought. Well, never mind. And immediately, blushing and looking anxiously at the officers to see if they appeared ironical, he said, May I call in that boy who was taken prisoner and give him something to eat? Perhaps... Yes, he's a little poor fellow, said Denisov, who evidently saw nothing shameful in this reminder. Call him in. His name is Vincent Boss. Have him fetched. I'll call him, said Petya. Yes, call him. A poor little fellow, Denisov repeated. Petya was standing at the door when Denisov said this. He slipped in between the officers, came close to Denisov, and said, Let me kiss you, dear old fellow. Oh, how fine, how splendid. And having kissed Denisov, he ran out of the hut. Boss! Vincent! Petya cried, stopping outside the door. What do you want, sir? Asked a voice in the darkness. Petya replied that he had wanted the French lad who had been captured that day. Ah, Veseni, said a Cossack. Vincent, the boy's name, had already been changed by the Cossacks into Veseni, vernal, and into Vesenia by the peasants and soldiers. In both these adaptations, the reference to spring, Vesna, matched the impression made by the young lad. He's warming himself there by the bonfire. Oh, Vesenia, Vesenia, Veseni, laughed voices were heard calling to one another in the darkness. He's a smart lad, said a hussar standing near Petya. We gave him something to eat a while ago. He was awfully hungry. The sound of bare feet splashing through the mud was heard in the darkness, and the drummer boy came to the door. Ah, c'est vous, said Petya. Do you want something to eat? Don't be afraid, they won't hurt you, he added shyly and affectionately, touching the boy's hand. Entrez, entrez. Merci, monsieur, said the drummer boy in a trembling, almost childish voice, and he began scraping his dirty feet on the threshold. There were many things Petya wanted to say to the drummer boy, but did not dare do so. He stood irresolutely beside him in the passage. Then, in the darkness, he took the boy's hand and pressed it. Entrez, entrez, he repeated in a gentle whisper. Ah, what can I do for him? He thought, and opening the door, he let the boy pass in first. When the boy had entered the hut, Petya sat down at a distance from him, considering it beneath his dignity to pay attention to him. But he fingered the money in his pocket and wondered whether it would seem ridiculous to give some to the drummer boy. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 301. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 301. Hold to the precious few. Petya Rostov has no chill. A Mohavian thirst for glory scrambles his mind into miscellany and his speech into senselessness. He seeks to slake his thirst by joining Denisov's guerrilla detachment. What Petya wants is an opportunity for heroic exploit, but what he needs is a therapeutic dose of Adderall and a seat for one at the children's table. His impulsive behavior and imprudent conduct betray an immature mind ignorant of proper disposition. His first error is in disobeying his general. That general dispatched him to Denisov's detachment, but forbade him from taking any part in action while there. Clearly, Petya's design for a future honor as a war hero means he will disobey this command. His second error is in talking too much at dinner. Epictetus, remember, warns us about such gratuitous speech. And let silence be the general rule, Epictetus writes, or let only what is necessary be said, and in few words, and rarely, when the occasion calls, we shall say something, but about none of the common subjects. Plea takes his talk in another direction, maniacally spouting off a scattered potpourri of inanity about knives, raisins, coffee pots, and flints. His final error is the father of the first two. He focuses too much on the future at the expense of the present. Tolstoy describes Plea's high delight and blissful excitement as leading him to be always in a hurry to get where he was not. The place he wants to get is a future crowned with a noble renown of martial triumph. There are at least two problems with this. The first is that the future is traversed only over the bridge of the present, so he won't even get there at all if he doesn't pay attention right now. More importantly, however, the celebrity Plea seeks is a dissipating mist, an evanescent chimera. It is a feat that might be grasped, but can never be held. Nothing is enduring, fame least of all. Better to focus on the only thing he truly has control over. He must understand that, to quote a philosopher who has wrestled with this issue, the time is now. Daily meditation. Throwing away then all things, hold to these only, which are a precious few. And besides, bear in mind that every man lives only this present time, which is an indivisible point, and that all the rest of his life is either past or is uncertain. Short, then, is the time which every man lives, and small the nook of earth where he lives, and short, too, the longest posthumous fame, and even this only continued by a succession of poor human beings, who will very soon die, and who know not even themselves, much less him who died long ago. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. All right, that concludes my reading and reflection on chapter 301 of War and Peace. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can either join my Patreon, purchase the ebook A Year of War and Peace, or go down into the show notes and find the link to my Amazon wish list for books and movies. And if you decide to get me one of those, we'll set up a Zoom talk to discuss that book or movie. No matter what you do, thanks again for listening and for your continued support. Tomorrow we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 302 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.